CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, smiling away, joining us from our Washington newsroom to talk with us about President Biden's first 100 days in office and the next. Ed, good morning. Let me start there with the infrastructure plan. We saw Amtrak Joe yesterday touting the plan. What's his strategy in selling it?
Well, you know, the idea here is essentially to boost public support for the plan across the country. They had a similar issue when the American Rescue Plan was passed earlier this year, where they found there was broad public bipartisan support across the country, just no bipartisan support on Capitol Hill. And that kind of gave Democrats permission to go ahead and do it on their own without Republicans. The thinking is if we can do that again this time, build public support and either pressure Republicans to sign on or just determine that, you know what, we can do it again by ourselves and not necessarily suffer any consequences.
And Ed, what about just the styling and the packaging of this? The American Rescue Plan, the American Jobs Plan, Families Plan. I mean, these are relatively bland and mundane descriptions for what are really ambitious proposals. Is that part of the strategy to kind of offset what might be Republican resistance, to keep what is transformative and make it seem pretty average?
Yeah, I think that is part of it, because you're going to spend potentially, if everything he's proposed was passed, it'd be $6 trillion in federal spending. We've never done that at one time, let alone in just a few months. And so it's just an expansive idea or set of ideas that he'd like to get done. Republicans say, too expensive, a lot of it is unnecessary, and we'd have to raise taxes. Why would we want to do that? But if you look over and over again, these are plans that are considered popular with the American public, in part because they feel it's necessary to get out of this pandemic, and in many respects because they feel government wasn't necessarily doing enough to help the country over the last few years.
The president is calling on Congress to pass some form of police reform before the one-year anniversary of the death of George Floyd. Is that achievable?
Well, you know, it seems that there's a good chance for this, and there was a lot of encouragement coming out of the president's speech where he set that ambitious short-term timeline. I mean, Memorial Day now only a month away at this point, but the day after, there were conversations between Democrats and Republicans who've been working on this issue quietly over the last several weeks. Members of George Floyd's family members of other people who've died in police-involved shootings on Capitol Hill, meeting with Democrats and Republicans, then went to the White House to talk about it. We'll know more about the potential success of this in the next 10 days or so. Congress is out next week, but when they get back, if the two sides can come to leaders in the House and Senate and say, we've got something here, let's put it on the floor and get a vote, that's a good, encouraging sign of bipartisan progress.
Before we let you go, Ed, we just passed President Biden's first 100 days in office. For the next 100, how can we measure success or failure?
Sure. So jump ahead to Saturday, August 7th. That'll be the 200th day in office. If any of these any of them, doesn't have to be exactly as written, but if he can get most of what he's proposing done in terms of infrastructure and these other changes and child tax credits and universal pre-kindergarten, if that passes by August, huge success not only for any president, but especially a Democratic president, to be expanding the scope of government after so many years of contracting it. That plus things like police reform. If that can happen, I mean, any kind of modest bipartisan deal would be a good sign for a city that doesn't normally find a way to cooperate.
Ed, do you have a whiteboard for the second 100 days countdown?
We'll get it out of the closet and we'll bring it along next time.
Dust it off.
Very good. Mr. O'Keefe, thank you very much.
Take care.